today's video, we are going to be taking a look at a game that was played in the Madrid Invitational in Spain. Now, yesterday we did a big recap when the famous YouTuber and international master Levy Run started playing in the tournament, and he had a very resounding first round victory over Tomas Sosa from Argentina, rated over 2,500. Now, one of the great things about this tournament is that Levy is trying to chase norms, improve his rating, and prove that he has what it takes to become a grandmaster. Now, he got up to a great start with the win yesterday against Sosa, and today he's playing 2 rounds. Now, in the first round, he played against Pepe Cuenca from Spain, a very famous commentator, and he had a very solid draw with the black pieces. And now, in the second round of the day and the third round of the tournament, he's playing against Diego Macias Pino, also from Spain, who is rated 2471. But as Levy started with 2 blacks at the beginning of the tournament, he now has white in the third round. So without further ado, let's jump into the action. So the game starts with knight f3, we get d5, Levy plays g3, and now we have this move knight d7. Now this is an approach by black to try and build a big black center. If white goes bishop g2, for instance, now you have e5 and black has claimed more of the center. So Levy goes d4 here, preventing black from playing e5, and now we have this move knight b6 with the idea of trying to stop white from being able to push the pawn to c4. Levy plays bishop g2, we got the move bishop f5, a4, a5, of course, stopping white from pushing his pawn to a5, and now we have castles, e6, and this move knight c3. Here, Diego Macias now plays the move bishop to e7, we get rook to e1, and now this move knight f6. Now, on first glance, you're probably thinking black should be better because black does control a little bit more of the center. In this position, white cannot push the pawn to c4 as the knight is in the way, and white has this diagonal for the light square bishop, which is simply somewhat blocked. So what would you do here? You desperately want to open up this diagonal, so Levy plays the move knight to h4 with the intention of playing e4 and opening up the scope. We get the move castles, Levy trades, and now he plays the move queen d3, and here black responds with the move knight to e4. Levy goes f3, trying to kick the knight out of e4, and now we have the move knight takes knight. Now, after knight takes knight and pawn takes knight, on first glance, you'll probably notice from the evaluation bar that it says black is slightly better. Now, while black is completely fine here, I actually much prefer white's position, or Levy's position specifically, because white's moves are much easier. And you're probably wondering, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is in this position, white has very few actual ideas. One is to try and push c4. Now, c4 obviously is not realistic after g6. If you go c4, I simply take the free pawn and I'm up a pawn. So you can't play for c4. But the only other 2 ideas that really make a lot of sense here for white are to play e4 or to play rook to b1, trying to claim the open b file. For black, on the other hand, it's not really clear what you're doing. Are you trying to play c5? Are you trying to play rook e8 and stop e4? Exactly what are the ideas? So Levy plays e4 here, very thematic move because white wants to open up this diagonal in the long term. Now here Macias decides to play f takes e4, and this really is the start of going wrong. Now, one thing that I caution a lot of people who are a little bit lower rated on is that just because you look at some opening course, you have some basic setup, it's really important that you try to understand the themes and ideas, because it's quite possible that someone could look at this position with the computer and say, well, black's just better because the engine says black is better. Now, if you're a 3,500 level player, of which there are no humans currently at that level, it's obviously true. But from a human perspective, having the easier ideas and understanding what the plans are in many cases much more important than simply trusting the evaluation or what the engine says. So we get takes, and now we have the move rook e8. Here Levy trades, and now we can take some stock of the position. Now, one thing that white has here is white has the 2 Bs, and all of these diagonals are generally open. If we contrast this with the position back here, you'll notice that this bishop is behind these pawns here. The bishop is not active whatsoever. But now when we look at this position after rook e8 and takes, suddenly both the Bs are coming to life very quickly, and white already has a significant advantage. So here Levy plays rook b1, another move that for me as a strong player is very obvious, because one thing that you want to do in chess is you want to create harmony between your pieces. Now this bishop on g2, it's obviously perfectly placed on the diagonal. The rook on e1 is on the open file. This rook on b1 is now on another open file. So when you combine the power of the bishops with the rook and the queen, white has an overwhelming advantage. And on top of that, to make matters even better, white also has more pawns in the center of the board. So now we get rook b8 here by Diego Macias trying to guard the pawn on b7. Levy plays c4, we get knight to b4, and now a very important move, queen d2. Now this move is not necessarily super difficult to find, but it's important to point out that if white were to play this move queen d1, this would be a significant error, because after bishop to f6, takes, and a move like c3, trying to kick the knight away, black can now play knight a2, forking the bishop on the pawn, and after white plays the obvious move bishop d2 guarding the pawn, there's a tactic with knight takes pawn, bishop takes knight, and queen to e3, simply picking up the bishop and saving the game. So when Levy plays queen d2 here, if black plays the move bishop to f6 like in the game, we get takes c3. You'll notice that the knight can no longer go to this a2 square as it is covered by the queen. So we get knight c6. Levy plays bishop to a3 here. Another move that I really like because it's very thematic. You put the bishop on this nice long diagonal. This bishop on g2 is on a good diagonal, and you also now are free to bring the rook to the open e file. Combining this with this nice pawn center, the pawns being in this little box, white has a clear advantage. So we get queen d7. Levy plays the move queen to f4, targeting the bishop on f6, and now we have the move bishop g7, and h4 is played by Levy. Now it's very easy to be critical as you see the bar slide up and down of these moves, but I think up to this point at least, most of Levy's moves are very natural. They're very free-flowing. The only problem with this position for Levy right now is that he's used a lot of time to get here, and will it come back to bite him at the end of the day? So we have knight d8 played here by Diego. This is still a pretty decent move, and now Levy plays an important move, pawn to d5, dominating the knight on d8. Now you're probably wondering, doesn't this move hang some pawns here? Now it does hang some pawns, but when black goes knight to d8, this knight simply has no squares to jump to anymore, which in turn means his rook on b8 cannot contend for the open e file down the road, and even though you're giving up some pawns, white has a huge advantage. So here we get the move rook to c8. Now if black were to take the pawn on a4, for example, white can play queen takes pawn, attacking the rook, and after rook to a8 and bishop to e7, this knight on d8 is very, very sad. There simply are no squares available, and after queen e8, white has many ways to be better, but one of the simplest is rook to e1, putting even more pressure on black's position, and maybe even d6 and d7 to boot. So after d5, we get rook to c8 here. Black wants to take the pawn on a4 without hanging the pawn on c7. Now the game continues with this move c5, another excellent move from Levy, by the way, because even though he's hanging this pawn on c3, the pawn on a4 can no longer be captured, and so white shouldn't be that worried. So we get bishop takes pawn played by Diego as expected, and now we have queen to e3 from Levy, another very, very good move here. You might be thinking white's down a pawn and in trouble, but after queen to e3, black has one huge issue, this knight on d8, which is simply out of play, and now the game continues with bishop to g7. After we get the move bishop to g7, Levy plays this move king h2. Now this move is not the best move. The computer actually is screaming for rook to e1 here with the idea of infiltrating on the 8th rank, and white is simply close to winning. One sample line is a move like h6, queen e8, takes, king to h7, and now after white plays a move like c6 here, you'll notice the knight and the rook are very passive. White has ideas like bishop to e7 here, and white should, from a technical standpoint, simply be winning. But Levy obviously getting low on time here, trying to find the best moves. It's obviously not as easy when you're playing the game without knowing what the best moves are. Plays this move king h2. Now this is a move that might not be the best move, but it's a very, very good practical decision because it avoids any tricks like bishop d4 and some ideas to win the queen. You still can play rook e1 or bishop h3, and you also keep the ideas of d6 or c6 alive as well. So here Diego plays move c6. Now this one I was starting to actually become a little bit worried for Levy because the position is starting to fade a little bit from the standpoint that now after rook to e1 is played, it's not quite the same because black can play this move f5 here, and if you play a move like queen to e8 after takes and king to f7, the rook can no longer stay on this 8th rank and it will have to return to the home base. So after c6 rook e1 is played here, I'm starting to worry about Levy's position. I'm thinking his young opponent might actually have some decent chance to survive the game, especially when you consider the time situation. Now, one thing that's very difficult to do at, I would say, some of these lower levels is understanding how much of a part time plays in the game. Now you will notice that many of these moves played by Diego Macias Pino have been played pretty quickly, and he has built up a 30-minute time advantage at this stage in the game. Now of course it's easy for me to say this is a top player, but time is one of the most valuable resources in terms of when you use your time and when you don't use your time and you blitz your moves. Now in this position with a 30-minute time advantage, I think that anybody even at the IM level can probably sense the position is very critical. But when you sense the position is critical and you have this 30-minute time advantage, it's very, very important to use some of that time to try and work out the complications and come up with the best solution in the position. Now, the reason I mention that is because Diego Macias Pino plays this move king to f8 after a minute and a half. Now this is simply inexcusable in this situation because at the IM level, GM level, any level is fairly advanced. You can tell that you're in danger here. White can control the e file. There are ideas like bishop h3, d6, queen e7. With all these ideas in play here, you must use your time if you have the time advantage on the clock. And when you've accumulated all this time and you have that advantage, to suddenly keep moving instantly as though your name is Jan Nepomniachtchi is simply not a great idea, because at the end of the day, fun fact, nobody is Jan Nepomniachtchi except Jan Nepomniachtchi. So in this position, Diego Macias Pino plays the move king f8 very quickly, trying to stop white from infiltrating on the e file. And now Levy Run plays this move queen f4 very quickly, and this is a move that I absolutely love. This is a move that's maybe not super obvious from first glance, but the thing is that it's a practical move here, because white keeps ideas alive like queen d6 here, d6 and rook e7, or bishop to h3, and is on black to try and figure out what to do. Now you'll notice that even after Levy plays queen to f4 here, Diego Macias Pino immediately plays this move f5 after 30 seconds. Now, as I said before, if you build up the time, you have to know when you use that time that you've accumulated. That extra time can be crucial in terms of saving games where you might draw a game instead of losing, or things of this nature. But instead, we get f5 played almost instantly by Diego Macias Pino. I don't know if he thought his position was lost, or he simply thought that Levy Rosman is just not a very good blitz player, even though Levy has beaten many GMs in Title Tuesday, and he plays this move quickly. Now this move is absolutely horrible, not only because it loses the game, but because it gives Levy a very, very clear-cut path to a victory, and Levy does not miss his opportunity. He plays this move queen to d6 check, checking the king on f8, and now Diego Macias Pino has to trade the queens. But what's happening here is now this diagonal is opening. White is going to push p with d7, and we're going to get a kebab on the 8th or the 7th rank, and it's all over for black except for the crime. So here, Diego plays rook a8, Levy plays d7 check, we get king to f7, we have rook to e7, king to f6, and now Levy plays this move d6. And even though these pawns are stacked on top of each other, they're very advanced up the board. White has ideas like bishop b2 to check the king on f6, or moves like rook to e8. And after d6, in this position, Diego Macias Pino resigns the game, because there really is not much you can do here. If you play a move like, let's just say c5, bishop to b2 is going to be a checkmate. If you play a move like f4, again, I think bishop b2 and bishop h3 is a checkmate as well. And if you play a move like g5, for example, white can simply go bishop b2 check, king g6, rook takes g7. And there are many ways for white to win, but probably the cleanest is something like king h6 takes king h5, and bishop to f3, checkmating the king on h5. So Levy gets a very, very important win in the third round of the Madrid Invitational. This now puts him on 2.5 points out of 3. He is in a very, very good spot, first and foremost, to gain rating points, which I like to say is actually the most important thing to start with. Is you have to get confidence and gain rating points before you start having these delusions of grandeur. You start thinking about more. And Levy, with his results at the start, he's definitely going to be gaining rating points, which will give him a lot of confidence to take more risks as the tournament progresses. And even though there's a long way to go from him making a norm, he has had pretty much the perfect start with a win with black against a top-rated seed. He drew with black against Pepe, I think it was the second seed, and now a win against a 24-70 with white. So Levy has done his job against the absolute best players, but it remains to be seen how he will do against some of the lower-rated players who are a little bit closer to his rating. But at any rate, he is off to a great start in his chase for points and a norm. So on that note, I hope you guys have enjoyed this recap from the second day of the Madrid Invitational, which is being played in Madrid, Spain, obviously. If you are not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we will be back soon with some more great recaps for YouTube. See you guys. Bye.